of School Trustees of Lebanon Community School Corporation will meet in regular session at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, January 21st, here in the Herman B. Wells Community Center room. This meeting is a meeting of the school board in public for the purpose of conducting the school corporation's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There will be time for public participation as indicated by the agenda. This meeting site is fully accessible, and any person requiring further accommodation should contact the superintendent at the schools corporation office. And before we say the Pledge of Allegiance, I would like to start us off with a quote about education. It says, "School is a building with four walls and tomorrow inside." So I would like us to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Havlin, can you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do have a quorum present, and all of our members are here. Mr. Hendricks, would you like to read the mission statement?
Yes. Lebanon Community School Corporation challenges everyone every day to reach a new best.
Thank you. I would like to now open the Board of Finance hearing, and this is something we have to do annually, and turn it over to Mr. Dennis.
Thank you, Mrs. Hutchinson. There we go. Mr. Martin, I was going to tell you I'm going to drive, but I guess I didn't need to ask permission. As Mrs. Hutchinson said, every January before the end of the month, and usually at the regular board meeting for that year, a presentation must be made to the school board that is to reflect the financial position of the district as defined by the Distressed Unit Appeals Board. There are 6 fiscal indicators that they have determined are a signal of financial strength or financial weakness of a school corporation. And then I'm also to present the board a summary of our banking accounts, balances of said accounts, as well as interest earned over the course of the year. So again, the purpose of this particular presentation is laid out in statute for us, Indiana Code 2019-7-4, and this was enacted in 2019. So the first of the 6 fiscal indicators, and I will say the timing of this report is a bit peculiar. I pulled all of these graphs directly off of DUAB's, the Distressed Unit Appeals Board website. These are only updated through end of year 2023. So we're missing 2024 on these. Making this report in January obviously would be tough to get end of year financials for calendar year 24. So all of these are going to be information that was pertinent to LCSC as of the end of the year 2023. So the first is average daily membership. Again, our education fund support or dollars from the state are tied to the student. So an increasing enrollment would be a sign of fiscal strength for a school corporation. Declining enrollment could potentially be cause for concern from a financial standpoint unless certain actions were taken. LCSC has grown pretty steadily since the late 20-teens. Again, growing by almost 100 last year and over 100 this year. Second indicator of fiscal performance is, of course, our fund balances. I have this on 2 consecutive slides. The first slide shows the fund balances for the major budgeted funds by year, broken out by bar graph. You can see the trend begin to emerge with this graph, but it's a little bit smoothed out when we sum all of those columns. So what you're seeing there is the sum of our operational funds on hand is just at $16 million as of end of year 2023. The next then brings in your expenditures. So with the overall fund balance being the net result of the annual deficit surplus, you're seeing the annual expenditures in blue with each year and the annual revenue in green. The yellow bar being above the y-axis, x-axis, would represent a surplus for that year, and then any year where that yellow bar sank below would represent a deficit. Again, a deficit a lot of times is assumed to be a sign of fiscal weakness. There are times, however, where a planned spend down or an expenditure greater than your revenue is particularly the board's wishes. So again, a deficit not always is a bad thing, we'll say. But again, for the past several years, going all the way back to 2020, we have ran in the surplus. Next is a fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. This is the gold standard for, does the school corporation have enough cash on hand for a rainy day, essentially. I'll remind the board that our board policy does state that we will maintain a minimum of a 10% fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. Our expenditures probably are a little low for 10% to be enough. I believe that for a school corporation of our size, really a minimum of 20% on hand is really necessary. You'll see end of 2023, we were running at 40%. So what this should tell the board is a healthy amount of cash on hand for any potential bad things that can happen. An example I'll give the board, the way property and casualty insurance is trending, we received no deductibles for any wind and hail claims on our buildings this year. It's just not something that's offered to schools anymore. Wind and hail claims in 2023 were a major expense for the major insurers, and for school corporations now, instead, for wind and hail claims, 1% of the insurable value is your deductible for a wind and hail claim. So is that what I said, the building? Yeah, 1% of the building. So you're sitting inside a building that's insured for $111 million. So a wind and hail claim here is a $1.1 million deductible for us before insurance kicks in. And that's just where things are trending. So a lot of times people want to hear, why do school corporations have cash on hand? That is an example of why. This shows the breakdown of revenue. Again, easier for the board to see. I know it's not quite as large on the TV screens. The pink there would be our local tax revenue, think property taxes. The kind of teal, that's the wedge that began in 2023, is our operating referendum, which of course is a portion of local tax revenue. Debt revenue is the green, which is where we make our debt payments from. Obviously, a larger amount of revenue in recent years to correspond with the projects that we've commissioned due to our growing enrollment. The purple revenue is just other local revenue. That could be rental revenue that we get from various sources that rent to use our buildings. The large chunk in the middle there is our state revenue, so think of that as our education fund support. I think what's interesting to see there is if you look at that, and this graph goes all the way back to 2014, so the far left-hand data point is 2014. If you follow kind of the thickness of that blue area, visually at least, it does appear fairly constant. So despite our growing enrollment, the per student dollars from the state perhaps aren't quite keeping up. Lastly, the gold is federal revenue. Think Title I there, Title II, Title III, Title IV. Think our IDEA funds for our special education expenses. And then the very, very small sliver at the top is federal stimulus. So that would be what a lot of us know as ESSER dollars. This is the first year we've had data on this. Many school corporations have a completely blank slide right here if they don't have an operating referendum. We do. Two y-axes on this, two y-axes, I should say. The one on the left is the total amount of revenue, which was right at $5 million in the operating referendum fund for 2023. The right y-axis shows what percentage of your overall revenue was that. So just under 6% of the total revenue of the school corporation came from our operating referendum. Last slide of the evening is the bank accounts that we currently keep. Always like to give the board a reminder as to how our money is kept at the bank. The vast majority of our deposits are held at the local bank here in town, State Bank. We do have some deposits elsewhere that I will get to. We have a variety of accounts at State Bank, however. The first is our operating account. We have a peg set in that account of $1.5 million. So at midnight every night, if there is a deficit in that fund, money is swept into that fund to generate a $1.5 million balance. Where does that come from? It comes from the account that's labeled sweep on that graph. Any surplus over $1.5 million is swept out of that account into the sweep. The reason is because there is no interest being earned on our operating account. That is intentional to create what's known as an analysis statement so that we never have to pay for wire fees or any type of banking fees. Those are complementary by placing 0% interest earned on your operating dollars. Well, it makes no sense to keep our deposits in that account because we're not earning interest at that point. And so $1.5 million is our peg that is strategically placed. But I did want to alert the board to that. We do have a separate account just for extracurricular expenses or ECA expenses. That's the second one you see in the row. Once again, to avoid incurring banking fees on that, 0 interest earned in that account. Moving down, you get to our sweep account, which was holding just over $12.5 million as of 12/31/2024. The column immediately to the left of the balance is the interest earned. All of our money market accounts at State Bank are tied to the federal funds rate. So the rate that we get for our money markets is tied to the federal funds less 50 bips, 50 basis points. So as we all know, watching throughout the year last year, the FOMC met 4 times, each time lowering the federal funds rate by 25 basis points. The interest rate that we're earning on our money market accounts is tied to that, and so we earned less interest in 2024 than we did in 2023. All of 2023, the federal funds rate was at a level that had not been seen generationally, quite honestly. So this year, again, was a fantastic year by all standards, looking at historicals, but certainly not as good as 2023. Also want to make the board aware that that is the daily yield, or excuse me, that is the annual percentage yield that's listed in the interest rate. So all of our money markets have the exact same daily interest rate. Some of these accounts have been open for longer. Accounts that were open for the entire year are earning 4.35%. I want to take your attention now to the middle accounts, the ones that are labeled 2021 GO, 2022 capital referendum, 2023 GO, and then 2024 FMB, excuse me, which is first mortgage bonds. All of those are tied to bond issuances for capital improvements. The board should not think of these as cash on hand from a sense of normal everyday operating expenditures. That's just money for construction projects that we've not received bills to pay yet. So those dollars are going out. So that artificially inflates what our overall cash on hand at the bank may be. The bottom the two that are second and third from the bottom are held at what's known as Trust Indiana. A lot of Indiana municipalities have deposits at Trust Indiana. Historically, Trust Indiana had performed better from an interest rate standpoint than what State Bank was giving us pre-COVID. Post-COVID, when State Bank offered the 50 bips less than the federal funds rate, it made more sense for us to hold our deposits at State Bank because we were earning more interest. This will be something I have to keep my eye on this year, because as you can see, the interest rate that Trust Indiana was offering on 12/31 is better than the interest rate that State Bank was offering. The effective federal funds rate today was 4.34%. We're 50 under that, so we're in the threes. So if Trust Indiana is holding steady above 4, could be a potential move for a large amount of our deposits for the sake of earning interest. The last account we have is with LPL Financial, and that is where this money has been held here for some time now. Early 2022 is when the bulk of this was transferred, but these are mortgage securities. Obviously, mortgage rates at that time are lower than the interest we're earning elsewhere. Consistently moving money out of these and into a greater interest earning vehicle as I can, but those dollars are tied up as people are paying these mortgages off that we invested in. A completely allowable investment vehicle for school corporations. And there was a time when this was a valuable way to earn interest. Probably not so much now. So looking to continually move over that roughly $2.3 million. So with that being said, that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Mr. Dennis, can you speak at all to the potential legislation in the State House currently that would impact our property tax revenue?
So the early bills that have been filed that affect schools fiscally certainly are, as you mentioned, making attempts to reduce the amount of property taxes that school corporations are able to levy. There was a property tax commission that was commissioned by then Governor Holcomb to investigate, are property taxes too high in Indiana? That report was finalized in November of 2024, ahead of the 2025 General Assembly. The early property tax bills that have been recorded certainly deal with school corporations that would be looking to establish or renew any of the three types of referenda. As the board may recall, two of the three types of referenda, operating and capital, are active referenda that we have. The other would be school safety. At the moment, you can place those on a ballot any election, any May or November where there is an election. Early legislation in the Senate would limit that only to November general elections, so even year Novembers. So school corporations will really have to have the foresight of whether or not revenue is becoming an issue, because only being able to place referenda on once, really every 4 elections, if you think about it, does put a lot of stress on the forecasting of revenue needs. The other, and this comes from the Salter report directly, where it was determined, again, I would dispute a lot of the conclusions that were made, but essentially, too many property taxes are levied on residents and commercial properties and farmland properties, which are all 3 facets of property taxes. The most concerning for LCSC, I will say, is the proposition that as of 1/1 of 2025, so if this is a House bill, and this has been authored by the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, so a very high-ranking legislator on the committee that determines how Indiana spends money, has proposed that no personal property, business personal property, that is put into use on January 1st of 2025 will ever be taxed. That type of property currently is 12% of our gross assessed valuation. So all of this property, all the commercial properties that reside within Lebanon and Whitestown, these big boxes that we see throughout the community, have quite a lot of automated equipment, and just quite frankly, a lot of business personal property that is worth a lot of money. At this moment in Indiana, state law says businesses can never depreciate that underneath 30%. So businesses have depreciation schedules. Current state law says once you get to 30% of the value that you purchased it at, it's stuck there. You can't depreciate it beyond that, and that becomes taxable revenue. This bill also eliminates that. So anything put into service before 1/1 of this year would be allowed to be depreciated all the way down to 0. So effectively eliminating the business personal property tax. Very early in the session, remind the board that over 900 bills have been filed so far. 5% will pass. Many will be amended as is. Always a little bit concerning is the word I'll use when the bills first come out. But hopefully through communication with our legislators and the work that the various organizations, whether it's the School Boards Association, Superintendent Association, Business Official Association, hopefully we can always, the saying is, turn terrible bills into bad bills. So that's our goal.
And that's going to impact us specifically because of the amount of TIF districts that we're seeing being placed in Boone County right now, right? Well, I should say in LCSC district.
So there are quite a few tax increment financing districts that are not able to be taxed via any fund other than a referendum fund. And so I will say that those funds do have quite a bit of assessed valuation in them that are those personal property. And so that would be a particularly concerning bill for LCSC due to the amount of business personal property that's in this district. We have neighbors that are, we're 45% commercial. Our assessed valuation is 45% commercial, 45% residential, 10% agricultural, which is generally a strength because it's just like diversifying your own personal portfolio. You want to be in different funds. Our neighbors to the southeast are 95% residential. So anything to provide property tax relief to commercial properties doesn't affect our neighbors to the southeast. It's very impactful to us. Western Boone is a lot of agriculture. So, farmland changes, I'm sure they're paying a lot of attention to any type of farmland property value changes that are made by this particular legislation. So again, some concerning early legislation that we hope we can have some fruitful conversations on to hopefully always share our story and our utilization of this revenue that we know is, again, we realize that these are taxpayer dollars, but certainly hope that everyone feels that we're using them appropriately.
Any more discussion or questions on the presentation or? All right, thank you, Mr. Dennis. And I will close this hearing and open the regular meeting.
Mr. Martin, can you take that back from me?
No, I can't.
I need to let go?
You can let go, but she'll get it in a second.
All right.
Just pop it back on.
We are approving minutes from several meetings and work sessions, and we'll be able to take them all at once, but we are approving executive content from December 17th, our minutes from December 17th work session, minutes from the December 17th regular meeting, minutes from the January 13th work session, and minutes from the January 13th reorganizational meeting. So can I get a motion to approve these minutes, A through E?
I'll make that motion to approve the minutes as provided in our background notes.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Henricks. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Thank you. Now we're moving on to superintendent's announcements and celebrations. Dr. Milliman.
Thank you, Mrs. Hutchinson. First wanted to just, again, we've done this at multiple meetings, but it bears doing it again, complimenting and thanking our custodial staff, buildings and grounds, maintenance staff, certainly through these times of the year, getting the buildings prepared for our staff and students and giving them a safe place to learn and work every day is appreciated. Be remiss if I didn't also include food service in that. Let's not forget that our food service are shuttling lunches from this very building we're seated in to the middle school every day, and in days like today, that's a heavy lift, both figuratively and literally for them. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of the hardworking folks that are making education possible in our buildings every day. I want to take a moment to congratulate our high school wrestlers. We had two young ladies advance to the regional. Olivia Nicolou, I hope I pronounced that right, Mr. Levine. All right. And Clara Granlund. Clara also advanced to state. She was on the podium at fifth place at the now IHSAA girls wrestling tournament for the first time in history. So congratulations to the entire team. You've got names and placings there in your background notes as well. The boys wrestling team had their conference recently, and we had two podium or two winners of that, Elijah Stogsdale and Garen Stokes, but you also have some other podium reachers there as well to see in your background notes. Our boys and girls swim team also competed recently in the conference meet. We had Camden Perrine, who won 2 events in the Sagamore Conference this time around. So want to congratulate them as well. See, I think I've got all of those there. The last thing I wanted to do is our reorganization meeting. Mrs. Hutchinson mentioned we, of course, elected the slate of officers, but wanted to thank Mr. Parks for his service as president the last 2 go-arounds, I believe, and your leadership through that process. And I know the board joins me in thanking him for his service as president most recently. That's all I have for my announcements this evening.
Thank you. Lots of exciting stuff going on with our students. And yes, thank you, Mr. Parks, for leading us through some interesting and complicated times with the renovations. So thank you. Now we're going to move on to informational items. And Mr. Dennis, I do have a school construction and renovation update.
Not this evening.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Milliman, first reading of policy update.
Yes, first reading policy. I will spend a little time on this evening because it is a change for us as we're moving into to next school year. Policy I have before the board for your questions, if you have them this evening, is our volunteer policy, most specifically a policy around background checks and required background checks. This policy revision will align us with our neighbors to the east and to the west and the southwest, and several other districts. Currently, our volunteers submit to a limited background check, and we're finding over time some incompleteness to that process. Also, we find oftentimes that we have an inconclusive report on a volunteer background check. That will kick it into a state police database. Without going into too much detail, databases at the government level don't always talk to each other efficiently, and it can become very, very difficult and cumbersome to get our parents or relatives or others who wish to volunteer in our building through that process. And when we get an inconclusive report, that does end up costing the volunteer applicant to be part of that database and to get that information released, and then we can then evaluate it. And what this policy does is it moves us into a full background check that would be required for all volunteers. This would go into effect July 1st of 2025, so basically beginning with next school year. What this would entail is that all volunteers would submit through the same database and same background check company that we utilize for our employees. It does come at a cost. It also includes the child index, abuse neglect index as well. And it's about $21. We'll get some details on that, but it's $21 for that background check. But like our employees, the database can be set up so that it would be good for 3 years. So it would be an expense up front, but essentially $7 a year. The system would remind the parent volunteers or volunteers when they're due to expire, so that they have some warning that, hey, your 3-year window is closing. You need to re-up if you want to do it at that time. So while it is an expense, I think it's one that gives us more peace around the process, gives us more thorough background check as well, certainly more efficient, and the parents who have that background check on file and is approved, it would be good again for those 3 years. The policy does require the volunteer to acknowledge that they understand that should they have charges or arrests or adjudications around that they need to report that to the district immediately. Otherwise, they could potentially forfeit their volunteer status if it's found that they did not report that. That's similar to what our employees are as well. So again, would be much more efficient if there's nothing on a person's background check. The system would actually automatically approve them, and it would send the applicant that email immediately. If there's something on it, it goes to a pending status, and that's when it would come to our desk. The policy also includes an appeals process, so if something does come to our desk and we deny a background check or to deny a volunteer because of a background check, there's an appeals process, and at that point, it would come back to our desk and we would have a three-person committee take a look at that background check and then make a decision around that, giving the applicant an opportunity to explain the situation, perhaps provide us with documentation around that as well to help us understand what may have happened. So I know this is a change and a departure. I'd like to thank Mrs. Hutchinson and Mr. Clauser, members of the Board Policy Committee, for helping kind of go through this and craft this and lend their expertise as well to this conversation. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
How much does our current annual background check cost?
Zero.
0. Okay, so
Yep.
this would just be,
This would be a new cost, but again, it would be for a 3-year period of time.
Are we thinking the district would pick that up, or would that be on the volunteer?
No, that would be on the volunteer.
to-
Yes.
okay.
Obviously, we have another reading that would come from that, so if folks have questions, board members have questions, I'm happy to pull those all together and bring those forward at the second reading in February. We would, another point to make about this is because, even though it would start in July, if the board does move forward with this policy in February, we can get information out to parents now. It's a 3-year background check, so we kind of clean the slate on July 1st every year, and people have to redo their background check every year. This could be done at any time, so it could be done before July 1. It would just be good for March 1 to 3 years later on March 1. So they could do it ahead of time as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're moving on to consent agenda staff matters. Dr. Milliman.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchison. We'll start with our classified staff this evening, if I can get my item to open. There it is. It will not stay open. Got it. I think it's staying open now. I'm asking for approval of new hires, 866 through 876, resignations 877 through 882, retirements 883 and 884, transfers 885 and 886. Under certified this evening, asking for a leave of absence number 251, new hires 252 through 256, resignations 257 and 258, and 2 temporary positions 259 and 260. And do we have ECAs as a attachment this evening?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Dennis. Seems to not, oh, I have it. Thank you. I have it. That's not open. I'm having technical difficulties this evening. I would like approval for new hire 863 and resignations 864 and 865.
We need, can we take these all together?
You can take them all together.
All right. Can I have a motion to approve the classified, certified, and ECA recommendations as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Clauser. Can I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Parks. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you.
All right, I'm going to have a few items to talk about after the passage of the consent agenda this evening. Wanted to recognize a couple of our retirements this evening. Annette Shue, our receptionist at the Administration Center, has submitted her retirement. You just approved at the end of February. She's been with the corporation 29 years in varying roles. Instructional assistants at the building level and now at the Administration Center. So she's been the face that has met many visitors at the Administration Center, and I think you all would agree, she's a warm and inviting way to enter our building all the time. We thank her for her many years of service, and we're sadly on embarking on that replacement as we speak. So Mr. Dennis and Dr. Ottinger are heading up that search for us. So we wish her well and time with her grandbaby that she's going to be able to spend as well. Also, this evening, you approved the retirement of Wayne Irvin. Wayne has been with us, I believe, 27 years, if Mr. Dennis has texted, if I'm remembering it correctly. Yeah, long time. And anybody who has gotten to know their inter-office mail deliverer knows that they become the face that you love to see, right? I mean, usually love to see, unless it's a package you don't want to receive. It does happen from time to time. But he has been delivering the mail back and forth between our buildings for many years. He's that friendly face in the morning that greets me every morning at the administration center. But also, he's helped keep our students fed. He has been the one that shuttles the lunches to Central and has been helping with those lunch shuttles that have been taking place for many, many years as well. So he's just been a joy to be around and to be a part of our team. So I want to congratulate him on a well-deserved retirement as well. And then this evening, you accepted the resignation of Jeff Smock as head football coach. And I'd like to thank Will out there, Will Willems, from the reporter. Was a great article, sir, that you wrote on that and gave him the due tribute that he deserves. Making a decision for what's best for your family is always the right decision, and I've shared that with Coach, and he's exemplified that. I've shared with the board on multiple occasions reports from the IHSAA officials who've complimented him for his demeanor and respectfulness on the sideline, modeling that type of behavior he expects our student athletes to display as well. Stand-up guy, and just wanted to take a moment to congratulate him for leading that team. And then with that said, you just also approved the new head coach of our football team this evening, Mr. Josh Yoder, and we're excited to bring him on board. He brings energy, a great deal of knowledge, and they've already gotten after it, by the way. They're already going. And he is with us this evening. We are super excited to have him taking the reins here for the next chapter of Lebanon High School football. And I'm sure Mr. Levine and or Josh, if you want to pop up here, you certainly can and address the board. So congratulations, Coach.
It just gives me great pleasure to just take a minute here to introduce Coach Yoder. Very excited. I had the opportunity all last year to work with Coach Yoder, and a couple things. We talk about football coaching, obviously the knowledge, experience. He's been a lot of places, been very successful, but some things people don't know about him is what he's been doing in the classroom and here inside the school setting as far as working with our kids in the weight room and his engineering classes. So he knows what it takes to be successful not only on the field but off the field. And we're just excited that we had him here, we could keep him here, and we're looking forward to much future success. So congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Millman. Thank you, Mr. Dennis and Mr. Levine and the board for this opportunity. I say this with all intention. I take this very seriously, and I intend to run a good program, and I want to do the best for Lebanon, the community, the school, and for the kids. So that's what I'm here for, and I appreciate the opportunity.
You have somebody to introduce behind you? I mean, come on, Coach.
This is my wife, Jill. She works at Westfield, so she's right down the road. And then my youngest daughter, Jenna, she is still in 4th grade. And my oldest is currently playing a basketball game right now at Zionsville West, and they are winning. So, yeah.
Welcome.
Welcome aboard.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Next, consent agenda business matters, Mr. Dennis.
Thank you, Mrs. Hutchison. As always, board provided this evening are your end-of-year financials. These are always a little bit more special when you can show the whole year, the whole pie chart for the entire year, as well as how we did compared to what we felt the budget would be. Page 2, as always, is your breakdown of overall fund balance, which is the line across the top, and the individual fund performances themselves. And as I have been doing about quarterly with the board, I've also included, because again, the financials for the construction projects are of course held at a trustee bank, which those are actually building corp dollars, and the school corporation, school board, doesn't technically have authority over those, but I want to provide transparency and show the board how we're doing on each of our projects. When I started this, we had two of these to show, Harney and Perryworth. Very soon after added Central. We've now added transportation, and we've also added the middle school. We'll soon be adding the high school, but on that you'll find what's been billed to date and in general just how far along these projects are according to billings. So as always, happy to answer any questions you may have about the financial report before reading the claims and asking for your approval of those.
Any questions? All right, you can proceed.
Okay, claims for December then. Claims, $3,239,568.15. 3 payrolls are included, the December 20th, January 3rd, and January 17th. Just snuck that one in. $3,668,642.66 for a total between the two of $6,908,210.81. Request the board's approval of those, please. Thank you.
Can I have a motion to approve claims for payment and payrolls as presented by Mr. Dennis?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Clauser. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right, now we're moving to comments from the public. Visitors requesting permission to address the board on specific agenda items should, prior to the meeting, sign in with the board's assistant, Melanie Beltran. We ask that your participants speak no more than once on the same topic and limit your comments to 3 minutes unless all others who wish to speak on the topic have been heard, and the attendees' remarks do not exceed the 3-minute maximum per topic. We ask those addressing the board to speak from the podium and state your name and address unless you're a minor. Then we do not want you to do that. Board Policy 0167.3 dictates that personnel issues will not be addressed. Concerns about individual employees of the district should be brought to the superintendent or designee. So our first action item agenda is the realignment of elementary attendance boundaries beginning in the 25-26 school year. Dr. Milliman. Oh, okay. No? All right. I thought you wanted to make your comments first. All right. We have one person who wishes to speak before we hear from Dr. Milliman, and that is Kara Wheat.
Hi. My name is Kara Wheat, and I live at 6745 Seattle Slough Drive in Whitestown. There seems to be an impression assumed of the parents that we just don't want our kids to be the ones relocating to different schools. And it's true that we don't want our kids to change schools, and that's never been a secret. And ideally, no kid should have to switch schools. But if they have to switch schools, it should not be surprising that we ask questions, we push back, and we have concerns. As parents, it is our responsibility to fight for what we believe is best for our children and our future children. And right now, you're asking for the public's opinion, which we do appreciate, and so that is what we are doing. I have here a petition totaling of 131 signatures of people within the Whitestown community that have kindly asked you to not redistrict in a way that hurts current students. However, it feels that the writing is on the wall and the decision has already been made. And if that is the case, then so be it. But let me leave you with this image. Imagine a 5-year-old girl, my girl, who just lost her little sister, who currently goes to therapy, who struggles with separation anxiety and loss. Imagine the day I have to tell her that she'll be one of the 145 students that has to switch and go to a different school and leave all her friends behind and start school over again, surrounded by strangers. How do you think that's going to make her feel? Studies show that forced relocation of students affects their social and emotional skills, which in return hurts their test scores. Imagine a young boy that has chronic health conditions. He frequently needs medical intervention by his family. Right now, he goes to school minutes away from his home. But with this redistricting, he will be 13 minutes farther away. away from medications and his family. These are just two true stories of students that will be affected. And we realize this change is not personal. You are doing what you feel like is best for the community as a whole. But for us, this decision is extremely personal. So I kindly ask that you do not see our kids as a number on a chart, but as a person who has no say in them being plucked from their schools and dropped into a completely different school, all for a temporary fix. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no one else signed up to speak, so.
All right, ready for the action items?
Yes. Are you going to do talk about the realignment? Yep, the realignment of elementary attendance boundaries.
Thank you, Mrs. Hutchison. Let's see. And I will drive Mrs. Beltran here in a second. There we go. All right, members of the board, as we've shared in multiple meetings, this is the recommendation that we're making for new attendance zones beginning with the 25-26 school year. Just briefly share with the board as a reminder steps that have been taken throughout this process. Mrs. Hutchinson's the only one on the DS this evening that was here, I believe, when this started in 2019, when we first had some conversations and commissioned our first 10-year enrollment study with McKibben Demographics, and discussions with town and city government, began planning with the school board, of course, and then we knew we were ramping up for some referenda at that time, whether it be operating, capital, or both. It ended up being both to address the needs throughout the district. Then through the last several years, we have been addressing those needs. We've talked about the rebalancing, redistricting as part of our referenda campaign, shared that we would be shifting enrollment throughout the district. We'd be staying with our 4 current elementary schools, constructing a new elementary school, and adding capacity within those 4 elementary schools as part of that plan. So that began as early as 2021, leading into 2022 as part of that referendum campaign. 2023, we updated the enrollment, 10-year enrollment forecast again, keeping up with a lot of changes that might have been taking place from 2019 to 2023. And then we've been busy. We didn't have updates today from Mr. Dennis, but we've been sharing with the board many of the pictures of the progress of the capital referendum dollars, and also additional debt that the board has issued, bonds the board has issued, such as the transportation center, our middle school renovation, and additional capacity, the high school renovations and student activity center that will construction that will start here in a couple months, and the planning and design of our pre-K. And then most recently, you were presented here just a couple weeks ago, the updated 2025, another 10-year enrollment forecast update that was provided to the board in their last meeting. We shared throughout this that we'd be studying this in September and October, giving options, gathering feedback during the months of November and December, and then here we are this evening, January 2025, with a recommendation for these boundaries to begin in 2025-26. Just familiarize the board again briefly with priorities, and then every time I think it's important to share that when you address one of these priorities, you affect another priority, possibly in a negative way, if you will. You push on one, you end up pulling on the other, and we've talked about the reasons for that throughout this process, but certainly wanted to balance building utilization, get the capacity in each of our elementary schools for potential growth throughout the district, efficient system of bus transportation, also to design options that were consistent with what our current LCSC families have and conditions that they have regarding like the time of travel to their elementary schools, and is consistent with our neighboring districts and similarly situated districts throughout the region as well as Indiana. We did not want to divide neighborhoods if that could happen, and so that's always one of the priorities in any of these redistricting projects. Obviously, being mindful of socioeconomic impact on our schools, and we know reasons for that as well. And I thank Mr. Parks for talking about that and on behalf of the board at the last meeting as well. And then, of course, the future dynamics of the community, which, as the board has commissioned these 10-year enrollment forecasts, that's helped us keep a pulse on what those forecasts are. And we'll do another enrollment forecast next year as well. These are realities that we've shared from the beginning of this project with parents through our communication that we knew. And again, going back to the referendum campaign, these were the top bullet was certainly something that we talked about often throughout that campaign, throughout our community, that we would have a need to shift enrollment from Perry Worth to one or more of our existing elementary schools, that most likely all elementary school boundaries would change. Not everyone would attend the school closest to their home, and perfect balance is unlikely. That's for some obvious reasons, right? Where if you're going to keep neighborhoods together, for example, you're not going to have a perfect division of your enrollment. And a perfect balance of socioeconomic status is also unlikely as well for similar reasons as well. Not going to read all of these bullet points. Mrs. Beltran will have this presentation on our site here, the board site for this meeting, so folks can read it. But just pushing back to our meeting with Dr. McKibben a couple weeks ago and his opinions on the options, on how they addressed the various questions. I think he did a good job. We sat down and talked about these bullet points, and I shared with him questions that we had been receiving. So some of these bullet points were in response to the questions and comments that we've received throughout this process. Which leads us to my recommendation this evening to the board that you adopt attendance zones from option C that we have discussed in various settings throughout these meetings, and again through the many comments we've received and feedback that we received. This option, remind the board, this option is in response to those comments and feedback. Originally, we had shared two options with the community, and we received feedback that helped us to design or to consider this option this evening. And then in doing so, it actually, as we began looking at this particular option, also option C gives us more flexibility in the future with least amount, if you will, of disruption and kind of the linear nature, if you will, of the boundaries. For example, if you look at the Harney central boundary, depending on where enrollment may grow or decline in a particular elementary, Harney and Central, you have a line here that we can push one way or the other. Similar north to south across Perry Worth, Hattie B. Stokes to Central, Hattie B. Stokes to Harney, gives us some more flexibility, less enclaves, as Dr. McKibben likes to call it, carve out neighborhoods that might be pockets within those boundaries that sometimes make those shifts a little bit more difficult. So it does give us some flexibility, I think, as well as we move forward. However, we do believe that this will be several year, it'll take several years with this boundary before that would be required when you go back to our enrollment forecast, and that those things hold true throughout the process. As you look at our current utilization, this was as of October 1st on our ADM. You can see where we were as far as the utilization goes, underutilization or pushing the utilization at Perry Worth. Dr. McKibben pointed out that this school year and next is definitely a trigger point, which is why this is necessary now. And if you look at option C, where we were underutilized or overutilized, you'll see a much more balanced utilization throughout all four of the elementary schools. I did point out at the last meeting, when you look at the socioeconomic and free and reduced lunch number, that yes, there is a red cell. However, when you look at the options A and I believe B, you are 32% is going to get you into the yellow for Hattie B. Stokes. And I mentioned to the board that 1% at that building is 3.8 students. And so we do change students enroll, withdraw, students move in, move out all the time. So that is definitely a number that is going to be at that 15% mark. I just want to point out how close that was to being yellow and having a green and yellow throughout that chart as well. Student impacts. This changed very, very slightly when we made a minor adjustment to the boundaries for the assistance of our transportation department and bus transportation along State Road 32. And we sent out a communication to our parents, elementary parents, about that we had made a slight modification. So I think the option C now is 237, again, based on that October 1st number. I think it was 241 or something like that. So it was affected very few families, but it will help us from a transportation efficiency and safety standpoint as well. So that the chart that folks like to look at the most, I think, is the one there to the right. It talks about the students that are moving from one to the other. This is about a 60-40 split, if you will. So about 40% of the movement is in Harney, Central, and Hattie B. Stokes students, and around approximately 60% of the number of students moving, not of the school, but of the number of students, of the 237 would be the Perry Worth student body. Shared this here as well, because this again will be on our website, so I just thought this slide would be helpful. You've seen this before, looking at the options and looking at the impacts on bus rides over 30 minutes and over 40 minutes. As you can see, I think actually it declines slightly in some cases for our elementary students. So we look back to those priorities and how does option C address those priorities? We balanced the utilization to the degree possible. We've been able to maintain efficient system of bus transportation. It is consistent with travel times that our current families experience to their elementary school and similarly situated districts near us and across the state. We were able to keep our neighborhoods together. And of course, to the degree possible, we were mindful of the socioeconomic impact, which we talked about. And obviously, the future demographic dynamics with the balanced capacity throughout each of the elementary buildings, we were able to address that as well. If the board so chooses to adopt these attendance zones this evening, these would be our next steps. We would be communicating with our families in the next several days. We would communicate this change with our city and town government to make them aware of that map and share that with them. The map, they certainly can go on our interactive map. The Board of Realtors is a group that we would send communications to as well to make them aware as well, and then our neighborhoods that may be under construction, just to make them aware of any changes. And then we'll begin looking at staffing immediately. That's one of the first questions folks have, because if we're reducing enrollment at Perry Worth, that staff is going to need to shift as well. So there's a process for that. And we would begin communicating with our staff on what that would look like. And then Mrs. Nichols out here, who's here this evening, would be getting busy with her team and to begin routing for next school year and preparing that as well, and then making sure that our walk zones are established or modified as necessary. And with that, I would entertain any questions the board may have.
Anybody have any questions? Okay. Then I would like a motion to approve the realignment of elementary attendance boundaries as presented in option C for the 25-26 school year.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Any discussion or comments before we take a final vote?
One thing I want to say is kids aren't a number to me. I know. And every kid, all 3,000 of them that attend our schools, has a story. My kids have a story. And this is hard. That's why we've spent millions and millions of dollars on our facilities to make sure our elementary schools are as consistent across the board as they can be. So when this change undoubtedly has to happen, and it's not going to be the last, but that all these kids have the same opportunity. Change is hard. I know that. But this does affect the least amount. They're not just a number. And it stinks who it has to happen to, and it has to happen to you. And I'm not saying that that's the only reason you folks are bringing up concerns. It's just, that's what is the hard part about this, about leading any entity, being a community member, is when things change, we have to change with it. And all we can do is try to soften the landing as much as possible. And that's what we've tried to do through the facilities, through upgrading every one of our elementary schools to be consistent, same playground. And I think keeping the neighborhood kids together is important, because you at least have your neighbor that you're moving with. And there's, having been a kid that moved multiple times from state to state, that didn't happen. And I know that's very, very hard. And so we don't take this lightly. I don't, and I don't think any of us do. And it's just it's just part of growth, part of change, and it is very difficult. But we have to change with as our community changes. And so if we're not growing, we're dying, right? So so yeah, it's a good problem that we are amongst a community that continues to grow, and we just have the growing pains of it. So that's all I have.
Yeah, I'll just touch on a couple points as well. You know, for me, throughout this process, one of the most striking factors came at our work session, our last work session with Dr. McKibben, is when he showed the forecast numbers, which, you know, our current forecast in 2024 at Perryworth in particular was within, I think, 10 students of where we actually ended up. They're pretty spot on from what we've seen. Looking 5 years out, it had a rise of 235 students 5 years out, as compared to, you know, rises in the 5 to 10 range at our other elementary schools. You know, what it shows me is it's indicative of the problem that we have with the Perryworth district that hasn't been redistricted, hasn't been rebalanced in 25, 30 years. And it's a pocket of growth. So we can't have kids in trailers at Perryworth Elementary School, and that's what we would be doing. We'd be signing children up to be going to class, walking to and from the main building on days like today to their trailer, when we have more than enough space at our other elementary schools to accommodate them, and where we're dumping millions of dollars to bring that up to the level of standards that everyone sitting here has. You know, we're bringing in new administration teams to, you know, Stokes, and, you know, Central has been working towards, you know, with a newer administration over the past, you know, few years. Perryworth obviously has a new administrator there as well. You know, we have very high standards for them as well. And, you know, I'm not their best friend. That's not what my role should be with them, but I can say in speaking with them, all of our administrators from Harney to Perryworth to Stokes to Central, they're all very hardworking. They care for our kids. They do care for our children, and they're kind. So all that is to say, you know, I I don't have to have that conversation with anyone's child, and it's going to be a hard conversation. But I know that I expect all of our staff and all of our schools to continue to be resources for our kids, and that's. I hope that doesn't come off as a hollow gesture, because I really do mean it. But I can't ignore. No, your child's not a number, but I can't also ignore the numbers that I'm looking at, because I won't put kids in trailers for no reason. Finally, I do just want to thank everybody from the public. I want to thank transportation. I know I put Becky through a few different reiterations of what this was going to look like from a transportation standpoint. Thank Dr. Milliman, and his team, and everybody with McKibben who's given us the information that we need to make an informed and intelligent decision on this, although some may disagree if it's intelligent. But I do want to thank the public. Everybody I personally spoke with has been very cordial in my interactions. In terms of the contentious conversations that I've had while sitting here on this board, it's been not a positive experience, but the conversations have been productive. That's rarely been the case. So I do appreciate that, and I want to thank everybody, even though I know the people who I was engaging with did disagree with the potential decision that we were making. But, thanks everyone for their comments and for showing up. We have had a lot of turnout and a lot of great engagement from the community.
It means a lot to me when the parents do come forward. I mean, the parents' engagement is the ultimate thing that leads to a child's success. So all those who have stepped in, I know you'll continue to do so throughout a change, and that is huge to those kids, to your kids, our kids.
I will mention, you're talking about the welcoming environment that all of our administrators and teachers will provide for any of the new students. There will be opportunities to visit a school if you are one of the families affected by that. It will happen later in the summer as we have still major renovations happening at a couple of our, Harney especially. We'll be starting work at Hattie B. Stokes this summer as well. They're getting some renovations as well, but probably like for Central, folks that will be going to Central, which let's not forget, if you're at Central and staying at Central, you're not staying at the Central you're in.
Yeah.
That is a brand new building, completely unfamiliar territory for the students who've been at the current Central. They're lucky. They will be finished with construction prior. If we're on, I should be knocking on every piece of wood I have. If they're on schedule a little bit earlier than the others, probably in July when we get a little bit further along and we have the ability to open those buildings. So we'll keep everybody informed through that process, and our principals will keep folks informed as well. Once this decision is made, then we'll have the database. We'll know who those students are, and the schools can begin that communication with the families so they can begin that.
And I would like to say, even though this is an uncertain time, one thing I do know for certain, as Mr. Clauser alluded to, is that the staff and teachers at every school are going to love and nurture your kids and make sure they get the best education. So I don't think you have to worry about that. But so we had a motion and a second. I'm calling for the vote on the approval of option C for the realignment boundaries. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Now we're moving on to change orders. Mr. Dennis.
Thank you, Mrs. Hutchison. You have your change orders in front of you tonight. Elementary ones are fairly minor in most cases. Actually, it's a credit back charge. The ones that'll stick out, and with the middle school, this is just going to be the size of change orders that happen at the middle school. Holding on to multiple multiple change requests before ultimately combining them into one single change order. A project of this magnitude is just going to have change orders of this size. As always, upper right-hand corner of every single project, you'll see the remaining contingency that we have, which was money that's in the budget for items just as this. The ones I do want to speak on tonight actually are at transportation. I have two fairly large ones. Actually start with the bottom one to Ferguson. In a way, it's incorrect to call this a change order. We were always going to have to pay for this design. So this is the delegated design for our fuel island. So we will have a separate awning outside of where the buses park, which is where they'll fuel up. We'll have 4 nozzles there for them to fuel up. There's a lot of infrastructure for that. The data just for the communication with the fueling system, obviously the power for the pumps. All of that is actually a delegated design by a specialized contractor that was brought on after the project was bid and accepted. So in a way, this is an expected expense. It just wasn't paid for on bid day, so it has to come through as a change order now through our general contractor. The other, to Millennium, is really 2 big ones wrapped up into one. About half of that is due to changes that were made through the site regulatory review that happens with the City of Lebanon. I think a lot of folks that are unfamiliar with Public Works, expect the project to be planned, and we know everything that's going to happen with the project before bid day, and the contractors bid on that exact project. The reality is we get excellent drawings together, but there is a bidding strategy. With Public Works especially, the contractors that do Public Works are, pardon my informality, gobbled up very early in the calendar year. So getting the bids out early is necessary, and before the City of Lebanon has gone through and looked at all of the grading and whatnot. And so there are always some touch-ups to the grading plan that has to take place after the contractor's bid. That's exactly what we're looking at here. Again, about half of that, $50,000. The other half is very similar. We have 2 intersecting projects that are taking place. Middle school had an immense amount of civil work for drainage and detention of storm water. The water for transportation is coming from the main that feeds the middle school right on Grant Street. So with that water line for transportation was started earlier. We directed that contractor to get that water line as deep as possible, as we possibly could. Even still, once the grading plan and the drainage plan was developed for the middle school, some of the storm was in conflict with the installed water pipe, and so we had to install 2 elbows to get us underneath the drainage there. So those jump out. I did want to give some background on those to the board, but happy to answer any questions about the rest of these change orders, but again, a fairly typical month elsewhere. So thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Dennis? Can I have a motion to approve the change orders as presented by Mr. Dennis?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is that Mr. Hendricks?
Mr.
No,
Parks.
sorry. And can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Clauser. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Mr. Dennis, City Stormwater Management Agreement.
Speaking of stormwater, brand new facility with Central. This is the city basically codifying with us that we are going to install stormwater management. We are going to maintain that and ensure that it always functions. And should we ever change it, we will alert the city first for their approval. So just some routine language comes with building a new building.
Any questions for Mr. Dennis on the Stormwater Management Agreement? Can I have a motion to approve the agreement as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Havlin. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Mr. Dennis, cancellation of state dated checks prior to December 31st, 2022.
Thank you. State statute says that folks that are holding a check from a school corporation have 24 months to cash that check or deposit it. You are seeing the stale dated checks, which are checks during calendar year 2022 that were not cashed, so this gives us the authority to cancel these checks and credit these funds back to the funds that they were to be paid from.
Any questions for Mr. Dennis on the canceled checks? Can I have a motion to approve the cancellation slate of dated checks prior to December 31st, 2022?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Clauser. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Mr. Dennis, appendices to the master agreement with Meyer Najum.
Thank you. Reminder to the board, Meyer Najum is our construction manager as an agent for all of our construction projects. This is their proposal for construction management services for the renovation and construction to occur at Lebanon High School.
Any questions for Mr. Dennis about the appendices to the master agreement? Can I have a motion to approve the master agreement with Meyer Najum?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Havlin. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Clauser. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Mr. Dennis, contract for roof and wall repairs at the Administration Center.
Thank you very much. The board will recall Etika has a 20-year roof management plan for us. When Mr. Conrad returned this year to just check on the administrative center, which was not slated for any work until calendar year 2026, he noticed that the wall infiltration due to the deteriorating EFIS had progressed more than he imagined that it could. And so with some extra funds left over from the 2021 GO that were appropriated for capital improvements, he felt that he could get this work done for about $200,000, which is the money that we had remaining in that particular fund. What you are holding is the recommendation for the approval or the award of this to Horning Roofing and Sheet Metal. I will remind the board that in general, when you approve projects such as this, it has been procured through the public bid method. This is a unique project totaling less than $300,000, which state statute says above 50 but less than 300,000. We can seek 3 quotes. We did seek, we reached out to 5 contractors, 2 of which submitted, so we're still following the purchasing procedure and, quite frankly, the law here. 3 folks just chose not to submit. Again, Mr. Conrad from Etika budgeted $200,000 for this. You can see how this came in. I will tell the board that we will have a change order due here because of the low amount or how much under our thought was. The lintels or the steel pieces that hold up the brick over the windows, Mr. Conrad thought we're not looking the best, but not in need of immediate attention. With the amount of savings we got from this, we are going to ask Horning to go ahead and sand and prep those for paint to preserve those lintels rather than let them to continue to deteriorate. So asking the board for approval to Horning Roofing and Sheet Metal for their amount of $146,618 to stop the water from coming in at the admin center.
Except for Dr. Millman's office.
Still coming in there.
Get a bucket. Any questions for Mr. Dennis? Can I have a motion to approve the contract for the roof and wall repairs at the Administration Center as stated by Mr. Dennis?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Havlin. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Mr. Dennis, I think this is your last thing. The grant of utility easement.
Apologize to the board. Hopefully be able to get all these in one board meeting. I think this is the 3rd board meeting now where we've had a grant of utility easement to Lebanon Utilities. Corresponds here with the high school, basically granting an easement for utilities that we'll be installing as part of our student activity center right here.
Any questions for Mr.
Are
Dennis?
these a blanket easement, or are they going to be isolated to where the facility is?
Not blanket, it's where the facility is.
It's going to be a 30-foot or something like that?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Dennis? Can I have a motion to approve the grant of utility easement as presented by Mr. Dennis?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Clauser. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. All right, Mr. Martin, out-of-state trips.
These are two percussion. This year percussion has picked up very substantially in the aggression of getting spaces and actually doing practice. Used to, they were like stuck in smaller spaces than they could really use, or just during the summer. This year they've been using this space plus the cafeteria. They're really pushing very hard to be a competition team. These two requested trips are a package deal, kind of. The later one in 329, they have to have competed in 2 other tournaments to qualify for that. And one of those 2 tournaments that they needed, the close one was canceled. So the 3-8 trip is to help them qualify to even go to the 329 trip. So they really can't just cancel one of these. So anyway, that's the 2 requests that I have for you tonight, the indoor percussion team.
Thank you. And in your notes, it says the trip is for 3/8/35, but we're not planning 10 years in advance. That should say 3/8/25.
Yep.
Any questions for Mr. Martin? That's exciting. Can I have a motion to approve the 2 out-of-state trips for the percussion team?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Clauser. Can I have a second? I'm sorry, Mr. Hendricks. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Haviland. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Our next event, there is a professional development day on February 5th, so no students will have to get out of bed and come to school. February 17th is President's Day, so they also don't have to get out of bed that day and come to school. Our regular board meeting will be